backyard right now, and as you can tell from the birds singing that it's sunrise, and I'm gonna read an Emily Dickinson poem. I'll tell you how the sun rose, a ribbon at a time. The steeples swam in amethyst, the news like squirrels ran. The hills untied their bonnets, the bobolinks begun, and I said softly to myself, that must have been the sun. But how he set, I know not. There seemed a purple stile, which little yellow boys and girls were climbing all the while, till when they reached the other side, a dominie in gray put gently up the evening bars and led the flock away. So first I'd like to talk about why I chose to read this poem in my backyard. And the reason is that I think this area is sort of representative of Emily Dickinson's life, because she lived alone and she never married, and yet she was able to write about passion and romance and her garden and the world outside her window. So it was as if she lived in sort of a room within a view. And like her life, this backyard is very contained, and it's technically small, and yet it has this beautiful view of the mountains and the ocean in the distance. And so even though it's a contained small backyard, it has a view of the rest of the world, and the rest of the world almost feels like a part of the backyard. So the reason I chose this poem is because it reminded me of my backyard, because it describes the sun setting over the hills. And one of the reasons I love this view here is because it's so gorgeous at sunset, to see the sun just setting over the hills and seeing the ocean change colors. And yet when I read this poem, even though I've seen the sunset many times over here, I didn't understand some of the imagery in the third and fourth stanzas, like this idea of children climbing over a yellow stile or this gray dominie. And that made me want to go outside and see the landscape that she was describing. And one of the things I like about Dickinson poetry and Whitman poetry is it seems like poetry meant to be experienced as well as studied and read. Another reason I really like this poem is because I love the imagery in the first two stanzas, because the images she uses of the sun rises, it's like nature coming to life. I particularly like the line, a ribbon at a time, because it's just so evocative of what a sunrise looks like. And it's such a lively description, because it talks about the news like squirrels ran, and the birds began to sing, and the hills start like unveiling their bonnets like they're coming into the light. But I think it's worth noting that she says she knows how the sun rose, yet she says she doesn't know how the sun set, even though she's able to describe that very vividly too, by personifying the sun as sort of this group of yellow boys and girls that seem to be climbing over a stile. A stile, by the way, is a passage in a gate. And so you can see how the sun seems to be sort of climbing over something. And the gray dominie, a dominie is a clergyman, by the way, I think is a personification of the night sky, which seems to be sort of guiding the sun over the stile. And I wondered if maybe this sort of connects to the transcendentalist idea of death not being something, how to put this, that the way she doesn't know how the sun sets, just as we don't know what it's like to die or what happens after death. And yet in this, the sunset isn't treated as the death of the sun, but more of the leading off of the sun to some other place. Another thing I think is worth noting about this poem is it has both a literal religious image in the line about the steeples swam in amethyst, but it also has a more metaphorical religious image in the dominie in gray leading the yellow boys and girls away. And so I think this also connects to the transcendental theme of spirituality and divinity in nature. So now I'd like to read a poem of my own creation. The sun set on summer's final day, like a soul from body torn. My mind flew back to early June when she had just been born. I admit I felt a chill of death as I watched red fade to blue. I thought of what I might have done and all I'd planned to do. Could I once more raise my wings, now shackled to the ground, I'd chase the failing summer light and live a life unbound. But why need I fear autumn when I know not what he brings? For who has come from next fall with tales of dreaded things? Need I call it summer's death when it could be autumn's birth? The crisp winds cry for freedom, and leaves long for the earth. And so goodbye, sweet summer, so sad to leave so soon. With anticipation mounting, I gaze at fall's first moon.